Excited about the matchup. We've obviously had great games. The last three matchups have been decided by you're really talking 5 points. 5 points. And then if you go all the way back to even 2014, the year that they won the national championship, our first year, took them to double overtime, if I remember correctly. So, we've had a lot of competition with these guys. We've played them probably as well as anybody over that period of time. But obviously, not good enough. We got to take the next step. So, they thrive on explosive plays at the quarterback position, in the passing game. Obviously, the running back is having a tremendous year, at the tight ends as well, but they are explosive. As explosive as any offense in the country. Been impressed with their offensive tackle, Thayer Munford, who we recruited, is really playing well for them. Justin Fields, who we know extremely well, is doing great for them. His touchdown to interception ratio is really impressive, obviously. J.K. Dobbins, we recruited him as well. Very, very impressed with him and what he's been able to do this year and really over his career. And then their wide receiver number 17, Chris Olave, is doing a really good job as well. There's a number of guys. Obviously, Chase Young is back just in time for good old Penn State. And, obviously very impressed with him. I've known Chase, know his uncle. I've known Chase for a long time. Obviously is as impressive as a player on tape in the country. Before the games he missed, people were talking about him for the Heisman and things like that. So he jumps off the tape at you.
James, about an hour ago, Sean Clifford told us that he received death threats after the Minnesota game. And I was just wondering, did he tell you, were the authorities contacted, and what does that say about fans and social media in general?
Yeah, I'm not going to get into a whole lot of it, but yeah, I was involved in it. I would hope I'm involved in any of these types of things where our players need support, and then we make sure they get the right type of support. But yeah, I mean, I was trying to be, and my wife told me I wasn't so subtle after the game, but when I was thanking the positive, loyal fans, that's what I was trying to do a little bit. I don't know. I don't know where we are as a society. It's concerning. We're 9-1. We're ranked, in the top 10, I think. We've had a pretty good year based on most people's standards. And sometimes you go on social media and you wouldn't feel that way. And the fact that our players are having to deal with stuff like this. I remember, I think before I got here, we had a little bit of an issue with Sam Ficken. And I see it. It's not just our fan base. It's all over. I think a little bit of going to this playoff model that we're in now, I think has had an impact on it a little bit. I think the fact that everybody kind of has a voice and everybody has the ability to contact others, it's concerning. But I don't know if I necessarily have the answers, but it's concerning, and you see it everywhere. And we laugh about it, and not this incident, but, I think, the Eagles won the Super Bowl, and the next game at halftime they're getting booed. And we laugh about those types of things, but I don't know. I just, I don't know if I have an answer for it, but it's troubling. There's no doubt about it. It's troubling. I think it's concerning for all of us, and I think that's sometimes where, where I maybe get upset sometimes, and maybe I shouldn't, and ask you guys some questions. But that's kind of where these things are coming from. I know the power that you guys have, and I don't want you guys to take it the wrong way. I'm just saying that's kind of where we are right now. Things get extreme. So, you hate to see it, but the sad thing, it's a part of our reality of our society right now. You see that in a lot of areas. And the last thing I want to do is get into other things besides football right now. But you see a lot of things that are behaviors in our society now that we accept that I don't know why we're accepting. You see some things from a violence perspective. You see some things that people in positions of how they're conducting themselves. It's just a lot of things that we're accepting in our society that we would never have accepted before. The things that parents have to worry about kids going to school, elementary schools, and it's just concerning. So obviously football is just a very, very small piece, but I do think it's a microcosm of a lot of other issues that show up in our society, and I'm not sure why we accept it, or I'm not sure why we think it's okay, whether you've had 14 Budweisers or not. I don't see why it's okay or acceptable.
Ohio State will be your third straight opponent that's exceptional at throwing the football. What do you see as maybe the biggest issue or struggle you guys have had with Minnesota and Indiana in terms of pass defense?
Yep. Yeah, I think to your first part of your statement there. Yeah, I think you look at our 4-game stretch or whatever it's been. I don't know if there's if anybody's looked at this, but I don't know if there's been another team in the country that's played a 4-game stretch like this. I think we've had the 4th toughest schedule in college football. So this is obviously another challenge, and a team that throws the ball extremely well. A couple things, obviously, first of all, you got to give Minnesota and Indiana credit. Really good job at the quarterback position, really good job from a scheme perspective and from a talent perspective. Obviously, all those things will be heightened this week. There's no doubt about that. But also, we haven't helped ourselves. I mean, there's been some times where we've blown coverages. The reality is that happens with everybody. We've been unfortunate the times we've blown coverage. We've gotten burned. We've gotten caught for it. We have to eliminate those things as coaches. We got to eliminate those things as players. And you got to give those guys credit for being able to take advantage of it. When we did, obviously, critical times magnifies it as well.
I noticed that Jan Johnson was not on one of the finalists for the walk-on player award. And earlier this week, it was announced that there were a bunch of tight ends announced for that John Mackey Award, and Freiermuth wasn't one of them. And I'm not suggesting that either of those things are particularly important, but is there a lack of individual recognition for this team for some reason? Do you sense that at all?
Yeah, I mean, I try not to be the biased head coach at Penn State and try to look at it from a big picture perspective. I think, when I get calls about things like that, I'm quick to throw praise at other teams in our conference or other people that we played. And I'm not sure if everybody does that, but we do that. And I also try to look at our guys. I can't imagine that there's, a former walk-on in the country that has as interesting and as unique of a story as Jan Johnson and as successful as a story as Jan Johnson. I can't imagine that there's 8 tight ends in the country that people would choose ahead of Pat Freiermuth. Could there be a couple? Okay, I can live with that. But 8? No. And I love our guys, and I want them to get all the attention that they deserve. Obviously, our focus is on the team and Penn State football, but we are big believers in that, with team success comes individual recognition. I think those 2 guys, deserve it. And I actually think it not only does it hurt them, I think it hurts the awards to not have those guys included. I think they got great stories, and they've earned it. But again, that's coming from the biased head football coach at Penn State. But in my humble opinion, they both deserve to be a part of that conversation.
When you're talking about the coverage, and some of the breakdowns you've had recently. When you're reviewing the film, how do you differentiate between a trend or an individual isolated mistake that somebody might have made on the play? You talk about the cascade of things that happen when someone makes a mistake. How do you differentiate between the two, and then how do you address if it is a trend?
I think it's the point that you're making. Is it a trend? And a trend is the same mistake showing up again and again, and not a completed pass. It's this has been completed because this coverage or this player blew the coverage. What I try to get everybody to understand, from my perspective, is it's like, okay, you got a go ball, and the ball drops right over his shoulder on the outside part of his body, away from the defensive back, and we had tight coverage, and we actually are holding the guy's inside hand, and he catches it. You live with that. You shouldn't overreact to that. You shouldn't freak out. We had great coverage. Our guys on scholarship, their guys on scholarship. The quarterback made a big-time throw, and the guy made a big-time catch. And we were squeezing them on the sideline. You live with that. The stuff you can't live with is a blown coverage from an assignment standpoint, or not using the right fundamental or technique, and because we didn't, we get burned for it. And that keeps showing up after we correct it. Where if it's a corner one play who makes a mistake and a safety the next play who makes a mistake in terms of blowing a coverage or a technique and fundamental, and it's different guys, and don't take this the wrong way, it's still got to get fixed. I'm not saying that, but that's the difference between a trend and a good player making a play, or different players getting beat and good opponents taking advantage of it. And that's, to me, the difference in the point you're making. Is this a trend when we go back and look at it? I wouldn't necessarily say that's the case. We've made some mistakes that we can't make, and we've played good enough opponents that they've taken advantage of it.
I was wondering how you would assess Clifford's handling of his emotions early in games over the past couple of weeks, and how if there's an extra emphasis on that this week with the tough environment and the fact that he's playing at home in his home state for the first time.
Yeah, I think that's evolving. When you're a first-time starter, that's very different than being a returning starter or a 3-year starter or whatever it may be. It is, and I think he's kind of gone on this journey where finding the sweet spot of what's right for him. Some guys need to be really emotional and play with that edge and that chip. Other guys are going to be calm, cool, and collected, and other guys are going to be there in between, and that's different for everybody. And I think Sean's been on that journey this year, finding that sweet spot for himself. This week and the emotions, I don't see it a whole lot different. I do think him going on the road to Iowa and having success helps him. I think going on the road to Minnesota and not having success, handled the right way, helps him. And then the most important thing is, he played in a state championship game in that stadium, so that there's nothing that gets you more prepared. It's going to be a very similar environment to that, right? No. For me to sit here and say I'm going to be able to prepare Sean for, what it's going to be like exactly, no, but we're going to do everything in our power to get him ready for what it's going to be like. But I do think the Iowa, the Minnesota helps. But again, 102,000 is a little bit different.
Hey, James.
Hey, Mike.
Have you seen enough from Ryan Day to see if there's a significant difference the way he coaches than Urban?
Yeah, I think the sample size at this point is still relatively small. But obviously, you look at Ryan's career. I don't want to sit here and say I know, but if I had to guess from my perspective, the two biggest influences probably in his career is Chip Kelly and probably Urban. And Ryan had a lot of success before coming to Ohio State, and then obviously, he's fortunate to take over a really good program at a point in time where it was healthy and thriving. So why would you change a whole lot? Specifically when his handprints were already all over the offense. So I think the biggest change is probably the personnel change, staff changes that he made, when he got the job. They're probably the most different on the defensive side of the ball in terms of scheme. But besides that, I think special teams are very similar. The offense is obviously the same because he was running it the last couple of years, so the defense is different. How they recruit, where they were as a program, all those types of things. I think it's similar, and why wouldn't it be? Obviously, because he took over a program that was already in a pretty strong position. So you see his fingerprints on the program. There's no doubt about it. But the biggest change I'd say is on the defensive side of the ball.